to be a great leader? Is it enough that we know our business, our product, our customers, our people, or do we actually need to know ourselves? Do we need to have a better self-awareness and self-understanding of ourselves to really become a great leader? And today on the Wealth Ability Show, that's going to be their topic of discussion. And we have a true expert on this matter, Margaret Andrews from Harvard University. And she's written the book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others. So Margaret, it is just a great privilege to have you on the Wealth Ability Show today.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So if you would, because a lot of our listeners and viewers are entrepreneurs, investors, people who really take charge and do things on their own. And you're talking about something that they probably don't spend a lot of time on, but they may. But I'm really interested in your concept of self-understanding. We just start with that whole concept of self-understanding?
Yes, absolutely. So, self-understanding, and I'll give you my definition, right? There are different definitions, and some people call it self-awareness. I think of self-awareness as oftentimes being aware of the emotion that you're having in the moment, right? So you're aware of that emotion. To me, self-understanding is that plus. So it's understanding who are the people and what are the ideas that have shaped your thinking, the events and situations that have made you who you are. What your values are, how you define success, and how well you do understand your emotions and the impact that your behavior has on other people. So those are some of the things that I think of behind what I describe as self-understanding. And you had asked a question in the very beginning of, is it enough to know your business? And my answer is no, but that's foundational, right? If you don't understand what you want to do, right? All of this stuff may not matter, but absolutely you have to know it. And that's one of the things that I always like about entrepreneurs is that they generally have very strong opinions about the way things should go and the way things should work. And in fact, when I used to work at MIT, we used to have a measure of people when we were admitting them, and it was called the IOTA, and it meant for independence of thought and action. And to me, that describes an entrepreneur.
No, that's fair. I think most entrepreneurs would agree with you on that. And so, if you would, why? Let's just start with why. Why do you think this is so important to understand who you are? And you mentioned a number of aspects of this: who you are, how you come across to others, how others perceive you. Just kind of get into that a little bit and give us a little basic tutorial on why you think
Sure.
that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to start something, if it's, one or two or three people in a garage creating something, oftentimes we will choose the other one or two people that are very similar to us. They have a very similar idea, similar drive, maybe similar values, etc. And so, not understanding ourselves in the very beginning may not be a big impediment, but as we grow an organization, we have more people, many of whom are slightly different than we are. And so understanding ourselves and how we come across to other people matters, I'm going to say, more as you scale. As all the stats on entrepreneurship says, it's hard and there's a very, very high failure rate, and it comes at different levels of growth, right? And a lot of times and this is not the only thing, of course, but a lot of times what gets in the way is that people can't get along with others. The founding team is fighting and can't seem to get over themselves, or that you're losing customers, or there's extremely high turnover. All of these things point to a lack of self-understanding and self-management.
So, kind of walk us through how you go about helping people discover themselves, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So there's 6 questions that I use, and they are all, they're big questions, especially the first one. But I tell people, take 10 minutes on each question and then go back the next day, the next week, the next month, etc. That this is not a one and done. And the first question is by far the hardest. And that is who and whose thinking has shaped you. And if you think about this is This is a huge question. And I will tell you right now, my answer to this question is 6 pages of single space type, right? And I still
Wow.
go back and edit it and revise it, because as you look at it again and again, you see different things, and you interpret things differently. But this includes, parents and siblings, extended family, childhood friends, coaches, teachers, your college roommate. It includes, people that have helped you and people that have hurt you. They've all influenced us in some ways. And I will say, when I mention that, a lot of times there are people who have things in their past that are very difficult to revisit. And I've always loved what British author C.S. Lewis says. What he says: you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And to me, that is what that question is all about. Because you may have been given ideas about yourself or about the world when you were younger that were A, not true anymore, or B, were never true. I hear so often that people will say, my third grade teacher told me I wasn't good in blank. Right. And somebody will say, it took me 40 years to figure out that wasn't true. Right. So these small things add up over time. So, it's, as I say, that's a big question. And the other I'll say on that question is that, some people can be on both sides of that ledger. Somebody that really helped you could also have been somebody who gave you ideas about yourself or about the world that really aren't helpful anymore. So that's question one, right? But if you spend a lot of time on that one, it kind of helps you answer some of the other ones too. The second question is, situations and events that have impacted your life. And I like to think of these as a series of lucky and unlucky accidents. Unlucky ones are obvious, right? That's the time you got sick right before the big interview and didn't get the job, or you got in a car crash or something like that. But the lucky accidents are also really important. And these are the one I hear with some regularity is that somebody will say, I really didn't want to go to that party that night, but my friend made me go, and that's where I met my spouse. But it's also, those things that you turned left instead of turned right, and then you bumped into somebody, had a conversation that changed everything, right? So situations and events. The third area is around how do you define success? And this is in your personal life and your professional life. And this is meant to be a deeper question than perhaps it sounds, because if people say, I want to start a business, or I want it to get to, $1 billion, I always say, okay, what's behind that? Right? Why that number? And why do you want to start it? What does that really, what does that mean to you? Because it's actually pointing at the fourth question, which is, what are your values? Your core values. And because if you want to start a business, is that because you want recognition or validation, or you want to show others what you can do, or that you want to, as Steve Jobs said, put a dent in the universe, right? What is it? What's behind that? So the values, but those are also really hard for most people to really get underneath, because we are not, what do I want to say? We're not led to think about that very often. We're oftentimes told what we should value. And so 2 quick ways into that. One is to look at your calendar. If we were to look at your calendar, what would we infer about your values? Because
Yeah. How do you spend your
these
time?
how do you spend your time? Exactly. And I always
Yeah.
say, what crowds out
Yeah.
what? Right? Because that's a value. But the other is if you see or read something that and it makes you angry, that's oftentimes because it's stepping on a value. And so, that is pointing to a value. So what makes you angry? If you really get under it, it's probably there's a value there. The fifth question is around emotions, and that is how well do you understand your own emotions and how you come across to others when you're having those emotions. And one big question there is, who knows that you're mad first? You or the person you're with? Because if it's you, that's pointing to decent self-awareness. If it's the other person, not so much. So how well do you understand them and even feel them? Lots of people try to, push away their emotions and things like that. But as we all know, they come out sideways and in a way that are not helpful later on. And then the last question is around feedback. What type of feedback have you received in your personal and professional life? Maybe it's been the same over your lifetime, or maybe it's changed as you've taken on more leadership or started a company. Because by the way, what the feedback you get is oftentimes pointing at that fifth question about how well do you
Mm.
understand your emotions and how you come across to others. And in truth, very often we are more similar at home and at work than we think we are. So quite often, if you're not a good listener, it's probably showing up in several parts of your life.
That's fair. So, okay, so these are great exercises. I love them. And I love that you went into the get the why behind the why. Don't just don't take the superficial answer. When I teach, I'm always people always give you the superficial answer, and I'm doing no. That's let's go one step back, two steps back, three steps back, and I think that kind of digging can be useful. But what do you then once you've done this, and this looks like a very serious exercise. This is not something that you're going to do in an hour. What do you do with that? What are the steps you take once you
Yeah.
have this all mapped out here?
Yeah. So I like to think of those questions as kind of a framework. And a framework doesn't give you the answer. The framework only arrays the information in such a way that you can see the insight. You can pull out the insight, right? You and I can answer the same 6 questions. And of course, we would have different answers. And therefore, we would come to different conclusions, different insights. I oftentimes think about these questions a little bit like Harry Potter. And when, I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, but when they need to really think about something, and sometimes their head is so full of thoughts that they can't, have you ever had that the brain jam where you can't think because too many things are going through your head? So they take their wand and they pull out their thoughts and they put them in this bowl called a pensieve, and they stir them around, and then they look and they get the insight. And to me, that's what these 6 questions are, that we're stirring them up and we're kind of looking at it and see what comes from that. So that all of that together gets us to, I use 3 other questions. As you can see, I'm big on questions, but it goes
Good.
to this first question called it, that is, who, how would you, or what type of leader are you? What words and phrases would you use, or what words and phrases have people used either on your performance or evaluation or in a team meeting or whatever it is? So, kind of what kind of leader are you? Second question is around, well, what kind of leader would you like to become? What words and phrases would you like to use or have other people use when talking about you? And then, of course, that third question is, what's the delta? What's the difference between the leader you are and the leader you would like to become? And that the answer to that question really gets you to, okay, now what? So what do you need to do? It's very oftentimes a behavioral change. It's, starting doing something, stopping doing something, listening better, not cutting people off, being more open to ideas, delegating better, whatever. We could go on.
Well, and you say those things like, "Oh, well, that's just a matter of changing that." But anybody who's tried to lose weight and their doctor says, "Hey, eat less carbs," saying it and doing it, two different things. So,
Oh,
you're talking
totally.
about behaviors that, for some of us, that's 60 plus years of behavior, right?
Yeah.
So that's not something you change overnight. So
No.
are there steps that you suggest taking to kind of help change those behaviors? Because it's certainly not going to happen overnight, especially when it's
Oh,
related to
no.
things like values and, your beliefs.
Yes. So a couple things I'll say. First of all, is just kind of a mindset. And that is that when you're trying a new behavior, you won't be very good at it yet, right? That you get better slowly and then quickly. And the idea, excuse me, the idea is that when you are trying something new, whether it is, being more open to other people's ideas or, delegating, whatever it is, that in the beginning you won't be good at it. You have to look around. First of all, you have to realize this is not something I'm good at, and then think about, well, how would I get better? And you might read a book, you might, go take a class, you might hire a coach, you might look around and see who in your office is good at this. You might ask them, right? So lots of different ways you might think, how do I get better at this? Then you're going to have to try it. You're going to have to try some some things on. And in the beginning, you're going to be horrible at it. You're going to make mistakes left, right, and center. But then with feedback and practice, right, you're going to overcorrect, undercorrect, right? So that pendulum is going to swing until it settles. But again, that's why it is so hard, especially when you're the leader of the organization, because the thing is, everybody sees you do this, right?
Right.
Everybody sees you flop. And that's embarrassing. But on the other hand, you do get better. People see that you're doing this and you are role modeling for everyone that this is, that you can get better at things. But the other thing I'll say is, obviously look around and see what other people are doing and read books and these kinds of things. But another thing that I think is very helpful is to think about, well, how would someone else do it, or some other thing? How would Superman approach this? How would a cat think about this? How would my Uncle Bob do this? Right. So to essentially kind of the idea of an alter ego, to sort of put them in you or you in them when you're in that situation next, and really sort of channel what you think that they would do, or that next version of you. I want to be somebody who does this. So in that meeting, I'm going to channel that and really work on doing that. So it's not easy though.
So how do you go about prioritizing? I mean, you go through this, you could have, 3,000 behaviors that you go, yeah, well, if I were to be perfect, if this perfect leader, whoever it is, I'd want to be. There's a lot to change here. And I think that's probably true of everybody. How do you prioritize that?
It's going to be very different for other people. The thing is you might come up with, when I do this exercise, people come up with anywhere from like 3 to 10. And I say, you know what, you can't do 10 and you really can't do 3 all at once. Pick one. It could be one that you think is easier to change, right? And therefore you do that and you kind of like, yeah, I did that one. What's next, right? So you're already on a roll. So it could be that one. Could also be one that is the highest leverage. If you've gotten a certain type of feedback for years and you realize, hey, you know what, this is holding me back, that might be the one to go with. So I always think pick one and only one, and get good at that, and then go on to the second one. Because as we all know, if you try to do too many things, you fail at all of them.
Right. So you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you saw leaders have different fails at different levels of scaling. What do you see? Are there any that you particularly have noticed that, like, okay, you've got the small business, say it's under 50, or I'll take it under 20 employees, right? To me, that's the small business. You're under 20 employees versus the business that's, 50 or 100 employees versus, getting to the bigger one. What are some of those things that you see that people really hold them back?
Mm-hmm. Several things I would say. One is an inability to change their mind. To me, that is a hallmark of a really good leader, is that they can change their mind when presented with a better argument. But that takes self-confidence to be able to say, yeah, you're right and I'm wrong, kind of thing. So I think that's one of them. But I would say in general, a lot of it has to do with not understanding themselves, not understanding how they come across to others. There's, an idea that, we judge ourselves by our intentions. I intend to be a good team leader. I intend to be a good boss. I intend to be a good leader. But other people judge us by our behaviors. So one of the things that I see a lot is that people feel misunderstood, and because they have wonderful intentions, but only they know their intentions. What other people know are their behaviors. So if those two are in misalignment, we know how they're going to judge you. And if ultimately, if you can't get along with people, people won't follow you. And that's kind of the kiss of death for running a business. If people won't follow you, if they keep leaving. I oftentimes think in large organizations, if you want to find out where your weakest levels of leadership are, look for where there's high turnover.
Right. Right. Oh, this is fascinating. So if you're talking to entrepreneurs right now and you're saying, okay, this is a lot. Okay, where would you have them, where do they start?
Yeah, I mean, I would start by, trying to understand yourself, those 6 questions, or there's lots of other questions out there, right? And some may sing to you more than others, but just because one doesn't sing to you doesn't mean it's not important, right? Sometimes our reluctance to go there is because we don't want to shine the light inside. It takes some courage to do that. Another thing that you can do is to do some sort of an assessment, ideally a multi-rater or, a 360 kind of thing. Because if you don't understand yourself, you don't understand yourself enough to know that you don't understand yourself. So therefore, your intentions and your behaviors are decently likely to not match up. And pay attention, whether it's in one of those 360s or in any other type of feedback, pay attention to feedback that surprises you or that you disagree with. Because very oftentimes what that's showcasing is where that mismatch is. And, you may not agree with it, or whatever. And, there's that old adage that feedback is a gift. And I just say some gifts come in ugly packages, but they may still be a gift.
No, I love that. I love that. Your comment earlier about intention versus how people see us reminds me of something I learned many years ago about that communication's the response you get. So if you're getting a response you're not expecting, that's probably your communication, not their. It's not their fault. It's probably your fault. So it's a good thing to. I think this is great to constantly look at who we are and understanding ourselves. The book is Manage Yourself to Lead Others, and why great leadership begins with self-understanding. And we've been with Margaret Andrews. Margaret, where would we find more information about you and your work?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is always a good place. I'm Margaret C. Andrews there on LinkedIn, or my website, which is margaretandrews.com. No C in that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just remember that this is, we talk a lot about economics and money and finance on the Wealthability Show, but sometimes we really have to look at who we are, because who we are has such a big impact on how successful we are and whatever that success means to us. And when we do get some really good self-understanding, we're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. We'll see you next time on the Wealthability Show. Thanks for listening to the Wealthability Show. If today's episode gave you a new perspective, remember this: the tax law is not your enemy. It's a roadmap. And when you know how to follow it, you can build real, lasting wealth. If you're a business owner or investor who's tired of overpaying taxes, the Wealthability Accelerator is your next step. You'll have the opportunity to work directly with me for 80% less than my standard rate. And I'll personally guide you through how to change your facts so that you can change your tax. Go to wealthability.com/bonus and apply today. Remember, it's not just what you make, it's what you keep.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.